ladies. My name is Haleh Shoa, and I'm the owner and founder of Picturely. In 2016, I decided that I really love making photo books, and I actually decided to Google how to even make a business out of it, and I found Cathi Nelson. And just last week, I found the very first email that Cathi and I had exchanged, and we just celebrated our 8th anniversary. Happy anniversary, Cathi.
Thank you.
And so, yeah, she's been a great advocate and shepherding not only myself, but over 800 professional photo organizers globally through learning and teaching. And I'm here today. I'm so honored to be here with you, Cathi. I'm here today to talk about my story. And just wanted to tell a little bit about what my company does. We archive, organize, curate, and design with family photos. And so I own a photo organization studio in Los Angeles, and I have 6 employees, and we handle everything from soup to nuts. And my personal favorite is designing with memories. So it's just one of those things where you can hold something in your hands, whether it's old that became digitized, that became a book again. But it's a wonderful thing to be able to do what we do. We have served hundreds of families and many organizations to organize and digitize their memories. And last year in July, we expanded from a smaller office to an 1,800 square foot office. So that's a little bit about me and Picturely and how I met Cathi.
All right. And a little bit about me. My name is Cathi Nelson. I'm the CEO and founder of the Photo Managers, and we're a global association that helps people start businesses, helping families and businesses organize, curate, and share their family stories, because we believe that all people have a story to tell. And the way that we tell our stories today is usually through photos and videos, right? We carry a phone around at all times, but even before we were taking photos every minute, we were taking photos with our cameras and capturing stories with our VCR cameras or our camcorders or our film. So I helped small businesses support families doing this as a business. And so we're excited today, though, to share, Haleh has an amazing story. A lot of us are fortunate enough to have maybe a collection of archive, maybe not many photos from from the past, but it's not unusual for us to have collections of photos. But Haleh has an amazing story that she's going to share with you about why she's so passionate about helping families tell their stories. So Haleh, why don't you tell a little bit about your family's journey?
Yeah. So my family left during the Iranian Revolution in 1979, and we left in phases. But I want to give a little bit of history about what happened and why there was an Iranian Revolution without really going into the politics. But there's a little bit of history that deserves to be told along the side of my family. The picture that you see on the right is my family. My sister was born in 1963. Her name's Kat, and this was her first birthday. And during this time, Iran was ruled by Reza Shah, which was the ruler, and he was bequeathed the throne essentially from his father. And during his ruling, especially starting in the 60s, is where he really implemented modernizing a lot of things in Iran. And that didn't sit too well with the people who were a lot more conservative and a lot more clergy oriented. And this period was called the White Revolution. And it aimed to really modernize not only the economy, but also just the society in general, and reform a lot of things with literacy programs and women's suffrage rights. So it was a really interesting period for the middle class, which was my family, for the middle class and the educated class. Mm-hmm. And as we know through history, that those who are perhaps a lower socioeconomic or less educated, they hold on to their ideals a little bit stronger, and they don't want to change as much. So, these are my parents in their glory days. And during this time, again, we did see a lot of cultural and social changes in Iran, and the speed in which it was happening, it didn't sit too well with a lot of different factions. So anyway, next slide, please. Yep. Yeah. And this is my cousin who actually got her PhD her PhD and her MD in Iran, and she's still a doctor in Los Angeles. So women had a lot of power, and there were equal amounts of women in universities in Iran during this period as there were men. In fact, in the late 60s, there were slightly more women in universities than there were men. So really, the changes that the Shah had brought on were great for a faction of the society. So, yeah. So, and then, in this picture is my maternal grandmother and my mother who was pregnant with me at the time. So this is 1969. And, during this period in the late 60s, the dissatisfaction of the Shah started to grow. And, there was a lot of factions who didn't like the authoritarian rule. And Ayatollah Khomeini, who essentially came back in 1979 to overthrow the Shah, he was ousted in 1963, the year that my sister was born. And during that time, he was sort of playing in the background to gain more power. He was kind of waiting for the right time to hit. So this was a period of time that you could see modern photos of Iran and everyone was wearing like short skirts. It was very 60s oriented, exactly how you would see it in the United States. But in the background, there were many people who did not want to get rid of their hijab, who did not want to become modernized, who didn't necessarily want their daughters to be educated, right? They wanted to stay in the old world and have that control. So this is me in my uncle's garden. I think I'm about a year old, maybe a little less. Gosh, I used to be so much cuter.
No, that's not true.
But during this time, despite the economic growth, there was a widespread political repression coming from the Shah. And there was a lot of different groups that were now starting to be against the Shah. It wasn't just the clerics. It was the communist groups. It was the Islamists. It was the secularists. So the Shah was kind of getting inundated with opposition more and more. This is me at 4 years old. I remember taking a pair of scissors and cutting this photo. This was my mother's favorite photo of me, and she was really mad at me for cutting it. But I thought, I wanted to frame it. So I decided to take scissors to it. But lucky enough, I didn't cut myself off of it too much. But during this time, I was about 4 years old. It was, the boiling pot was getting worse and worse, essentially, in Iran. And this is me at 7 with my dad. This is one of my favorite photos because my dad, to this day, my dad still holds our face like that to kiss us. It's very, very cute. And so by the time 1979 rolled around, the Iranian Revolution, there was a lot going on, and there was a lot of people that were like my parents who didn't believe that it was really going to go down because the Middle East has had its ups and downs, and a lot of people thought, okay, let's just let it ride, and if we let it ride, it's all going to go away. But somehow my mother had this instinct of, this is not the same. I'm going to leave. So my family actually left in phases. My brother was already here, getting his education since 1977. And within 3 days, my older sister had to leave at the age of 15. And it was really, really difficult. It was just a small suitcase of her belongings. And then it was my mother, my little sister, and I, and we really couldn't take much with us except the family photos. So, and these family photos that I'm sharing with you are basically what we saved and what I was able to scan and share with my family globally so that we can all enjoy them. And basically this is my father on his way to the United States. One of my last memories in Iran was that I was with my dad in the square where they were taking the hostages in Tehran. And, and as most of you may know, this was a 444-day hostage takeover that they kept the hostages for over a year and a half. And this was my dad on his way to United States. And this was a picture of him in Milan. Yeah, it's a really wonderful photograph. And so we left Iran, and our first stop was Austria. And again, as mentioned, my family did leave in phases, and I was here with my little sister and my mom visiting my family. I have family in 4 continents as a result of the revolution. And we were visiting family in Austria to see, like, does it feel right for us to move to Austria? And it just did not feel right for my mom. So we ended up in United States, in Detroit. So in Detroit, yeah. And when I read this quote, refugee didn't just escape a place. They had to escape 1,000 memories until they put enough time and distance between them and their misery to wake to a better day. This really encapsulated the experience that my family and I went through. I mean, can you imagine? My dad is in his 50s. He doesn't speak the language. He has a thriving business in a country, and everything just all the rug gets pulled from underneath him. It's just like, and this talk is about resilience. And when when we sit down and look at our family photos and talk about these experiences, it's very hard, but it's that glimmer of hope that they brought with them. And, my family, I'm not new to this experience. There's many immigrants in the United States, whether they're newly immigrant or their ancestors were immigrant. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a family story that we can enjoy and share through photograph. And I'm just so grateful that my mom had the foresight to not only get out of Iran when she did, but also to bring all the family memories so that we can actually have some frame of reference, because there were many people from my childhood who I never saw again. I have no idea what happened to those children who I was in 5th grade with. I have no idea what happened to my teachers. In fact, I have very little memory of my childhood, as I had mentioned, probably because of the trauma. But,
Wow.
But that is my story and how I started this business. And I hope that, people get inspired by, no matter what your story is, to really dig through and tell your family story. And we'll get into that too. So I'm going to let Cathi talk about 5 tips of preserving your family legacy. And I'll jump in
jump in with me. That's I can see the emotion of it. It is a powerful, I can feel your emotion even telling that story, which I know you've told many times. And so those of you that are listening, I think, Haleh, you probably put yourself in that situation. And I'm sure the older you get, the more you realize what your parents really went through, especially, as a child, you hear those stories. Today here at Roots Tech, which is an amazing place to be, I logged into Family Search for the first time and discovered that somebody had recorded my grandfather, who I know came from Italy. He stowed away when he was, now I know, 15. Somebody put the date that I know part of that story. So that connecting with our past is just so important in a place like this where, you're at a genealogy conference where people are connecting. You can start to see the magic of that. So here's some ideas for those of you that are home watching, some tips on preserving your family legacy. The first thing we always tell people is to know your why. What is it that you want to accomplish? Because to just say, I want to tell my family story and know my family history is like this, that's like a huge elephant, right? There's a saying that you eat an elephant one bite at a time. So you want to, is there a special event coming up? Is there a milestone birthday, or is there, do you have a date in mind about when you want to have, is it something you want to have ready for next Christmas? I mean, here it is, maybe a holiday. We're in just beginning of March. It can take that long. I always tell people, just because you can't organize all the photos that it took you a lifetime to accumulate in a weekend. And so people tend to underestimate how long it's really going to take. So knowing your why is really important, and to write that down, share it with other people.
And it's also important to note that you may have an aging parent, and get those stories out of them before the inevitable.
Yeah. So, yes, I wish, and that's one of those things I think as we age. Recently, I was watching a show of immigrants coming to the U.S., and I was thinking, I've always known that story that my grandfather stowed away in a boat, but I never asked him, how big was the boat? It just dawned on me.
Right. Yeah.
What did it smell like, or what did you eat on the boat? And, he's long passed away, so I'll never know those little details that now I'd be fascinated to know. The second step we always say is what we call the hunt and gather, or the search, is to gather everything in one place so that you can kind of assess the mess, is what we say. But it's really helpful if you start to get an idea of where everything is, because you may have boxes of photos under the bed, up in the attic. You might have, albums with multiple years of photos. You might have external hard drives, old SD cards, old computers, your photos. And not only photos, but we always say it's really important to think about video and memorabilia, children's artwork, the newspaper articles, letters. All of that is really what we mean when we talk about, organizing photos. What we're really talking about is your whole visual heritage. Maybe it's, the outfit that your child came home in the hospital with. In the back of my drawer are the two little outfits that both of my kids came home from the hospital in. I just can't bring myself to, but I would love to have them maybe photographed and put into a special box. So, hunt and gathering, knowing what you have and making a list.
And that's just the analog. And we can get into the digital too, right? Hunt and gather from the 1990s when digital cameras started to come into play. There's a lot of families who still have their memories on SD cards because that's what they thought. I had a client who brought over 800 SD cards because she didn't know that you can download them and wipe it and reuse it. So yeah. It's the same concept for digital.
Yes, absolutely. And then this fifth step we talk about is organize and curate. What we mean by organize and curate is the way I actually started the photo managers is somebody once said, would you make an album of my dad who had passed away, and he was a gardener? And then she handed me like boxes of photos. I said, well, Maria, I can't make you the album until I have to organize these photos first. We want to create a narrative with a beginning, middle, and end. That's really what we mean by curation. The idea that we don't need every photo that was ever taken. We don't need, the organization is a means to an end. The organization is a way to make sense of the story. Like you kind of went in, you just told that story in detail, in chronological order. Like this happened in this time, at this date, this date. So that's really important. And if it's all just a big mess spread everywhere, and we'll have some handouts too. We have some great tips about creating you can take a pieces of paper on a wall and, create a family timeline and start organizing the photos along a family timeline. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that you can do that. And it's okay if you don't know exactly like what Christmas that photo was, or what, sometimes people don't know what birthday.
Yeah.
5 or 6 in this.
Yeah, that's right. I'm really glad that you're mentioning that, because in our studio, we start every project with a family tree. Okay. So we spend the first half an hour, 45 minutes with our clients when we first start a project to get to know the family members, their names, their maiden names. We work with maiden names because we want to make sure that they know that this person wasn't my dad's sister. It was actually my dad's wife. Sometimes when you keep the husband's last name, it gets a little confusing when it's a huge family tree. And we make sure we collect the birthdays, the death days, as much information as possible, because that helps us organize and of course curate as we're organizing, but it helps us organize all the memories.
Yeah. And then we'll talk a little bit more about some tips on that in the next slide. And then the idea of backing up and saving. You go through all this effort. If you haven't backed up your photos, please make sure that you back up. We recommend, a lot of us will use a company called Backblaze, which is it's just backing everything up, behind the scenes. But you want to make sure that you're protecting all the work that you're doing and make sure they have an external hard drive where especially when you're dealing with your digital photos, in case, hard drives crash, technology changes. I mean, all sorts of things can put your photos at risk. So you want to make sure you're backing up and saving your photos.
You want to talk about the 3-2-1 method?
Go ahead. Yeah.
The 3-2-1 method is, it's basically what we all subscribe to and practice. It's 3 copies of your memories in 2 places and 1 offsite.
Yep.
So it's really important to practice that.
So think about, one way would be printed, the second would be maybe in the cloud, and the third would be on the external hard drive. There's your 3 places, right?
That's right.
And then 1 offsite. So whether it's your external, you have another external hard drive at your sister-in-law's,
That's
whether
right.
your cloud is your offsite. But then the part that really matters, all of this matters because it comes down to the idea that you want to share and enjoy. And you know what? There's sadness though with photos too. We tend to want to talk about always the fun part of it, but we're humans, right? In life, there's loss and there's difficult situations, and it's okay to talk about those things. One, it's great to build resilience in the next generation, to understand the struggles that you've gone through in your generation. But the purpose of all of this is so that you can share it and then share those stories to the next generation.
Yeah. I mean, going through my photos, I really feel like there is such a thing, and we now know that there's such a thing as generational trauma. And, going through that and taking the time and just bringing that curiosity forward with my parents and with the elders in my family, I really feel like it's healed a lot between the intergenerational. So, it to me, it's really important and the photos were my gateway. I mean, of course, you don't have to use photos necessarily. You could just bring your curiosity and start asking questions. But it's wonderful to have that frame of reference.
Yeah, people always will say to us a lot, well, how do I know my kids will care about their photos? And I say, oh, I promise you they will. They may not right now, depending how old they are or what stage of life they are. But once they have families or once somebody passes on, it's part of the human tradition to be curious about where we come from and who we are and our identity. It just can develop at different stages of life. In your 20s, it's usually not the most compelling thing because you're creating your own identity for the first time.
That's right.
But by the time you're in your 40s and 50s, those stories, like me asking that thing about here I am thinking about my grandfather. I didn't ask him that in my 20s because I wasn't thinking much about him when he was alive. I mean, I would go visit him and I loved him, but it's not until this stage of life that I really start to think a lot more about how brave he was or what he went through for that to happen.
We were in the ego phase of our
correct,
right?
Yes,
we were in the ego phase at that phase,
which is where you're supposed to be at that age. Right?
It's funny that you mentioned the age thing. I find that kids until about 10 or 11 are really interested in their heritage, and then when they hit the teenage, when the hormones start really kicking in, they're like, I don't care about this, and then it cut to in their 30s.
Yeah, it's a cycle of cycle.
Yeah,
of life, right?
That's right.
So I came up with an acronym called the ABCs of photo organizing years ago to help my clients just visualize what I was trying to talk about doing. So this is the acronym. It can be helpful for you if you're looking at a big box of photos and you're trying to think, oh my gosh, how do I get started? The questions you want to ask yourself is when you go through those photos, is this an A photo, album worthy, your best photo, you'd call it the A photo. The reason I came up with the B photos, though, is because I know how hard it is to decide if it's an A photo. Maybe you have 3 photos that kind of all look alike and you're like, I like all of them. What do I do? Okay, it's okay. Pick which one is the best, and then the other ones are the second best. They're your B photos. You can put them back in the box. You're not going to throw them away. They support the A photos, but you're not 100% sure if you want to spend the time and money to digitize them and keep them. I suggest that you put a note on that box and you say, if you open this after I've passed away, you have my permission to throw these photos away. Because unfortunately, what happens to too many people is that they inherit boxes of photos from other generations of nameless people. And it's really a guilt burden on those family members to not know what to do with those photos. So that's kind of a little tip. Your family will thank you if you do that, because then you have your C photos. Yes, you can toss those photos away.
The dupes, the duds, the blurries.
A lot of the scenery, I always say the sunsets, hopefully the sun is going to rise and set. The scenery, the flowers, the snow scenes. I mean, especially with digital photos. Like it was a beautiful sky here. I flew into Salt Lake City. The sky was brilliant blue, and you just had a beautiful snowstorm. So the mountains were so white, and I took like 7 pictures outside my window. Nobody needs to see those photos after today. I mean, yesterday, right? Because it's just, they're not relevant. So those are the photos that you want to delete. Those are the photos that you want to throw away if you kept them, because what you want to look for are the photos that tell a story, because that's what we're looking for, right? So you can know better if the photo tells a story. Keep it, even if it's like that photo of your dad, like holding your face like that. That story. I might have looked at it and thought that wasn't a good photo because he's kind of like squishing your face.
That's right.
You look at that photo and said,
that's right.
Oh my gosh, he still does that, right?
Yeah. And so we do the ABCs for our clients, because there are a lot of clients who get really overwhelmed with how much stuff they have, or they have a professional job and they don't want to take this on. So they hire a professional photo organizer, such as myself or many others that belong to Cathy's group. But one of the things I wanted to mention is, if there is a photo that is maybe blurry but has significance, make sure you save that photo, because it has significance. Maybe someone's ashes were thrown at the foot of that mountain,
Right, so. Exactly, right. We don't know what the story is. And there's something, I'm sorry, I'm just going to looking up at one of the interesting things is that people talk about AI today a lot, like AI is going to replace the need for, curation and things like that. And there's such amazing technology being created all the time. I mean, it's mind boggling, actually, the amount of technology. But one of the things I like to talk about AI, and I don't have the example here in this slideshow, but if I have a picture of my son at an airport and standing next to a young woman and she's holding flowers. So if you looked at that photo, these are all the stories you could tell yourself. Oh, it's his girlfriend, or they just got engaged, or it's his sister, or, there's a lot of things that you would make assumptions about. AI would tell us that it was taken, the date it was taken, that it was at Bradley International Airport. It would facial recognize Joshua and Belinda. It would know what kind of flowers are. If I wanted to know what flowers were in that flower, thing that we bought probably at the grocery store on the way to the airport, it'll know the people. Right now it's kind of blurry in the background, but I guarantee that AI will actually be able to tell us who even the people are in the background. But what it won't tell you is my son was adopted, and through 23, and we discovered through 23andMe, somebody sent him a note, said, how is this possible? You're my first cousin. I didn't know I had a first cousin in the United States. My aunt, Gabby and Uncle Ro, they're your parents. And he was blown away, and we flew her to the U.S. We flew her to Hartford. And the story behind that photo is it's the first time he looked in the face of somebody that looked like him. And they look a lot alike, and it's an amazing story.
See, that's a story of resilience.
Yes, it is. There's a lot to that story about that, the whole piece of adoption. Yeah. AI can't tell that story, right? So only you can tell, like that story of your dad, or even him in the square with those chickens and things, right? That's a really great composed photograph, but I would never have known he was on his way.
Yeah, that's right. What the meaning of that was. That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's the part that we really hope by listening to us today is that you're feeling empowered and excited about telling some of those stories around your photos.
Empowered and inspired.
Yes. So I think you have...
so I've developed a 7-step guide to organizing your photos. In there are a lot of tips. There are links. There's a list of tools that you need to purchase. So in order to get that list, you can sign up at picturely.com /rootstech, or you can simply use the QR code.
So we'll leave that up there for a minute for people to grab that QR code. And
I got some really good feedback on this 7-step guide, so I'm really proud of it.
And then, of course, as well, I do a weekly newsletter. It's called Cathy's Picks.
I love that newsletter, Cathi.
Thank you.
I really get inspired by this newsletter.
Yeah, we get.
I just love it. I really want everyone to sign up for this newsletter because it's so well curated. It's got so many great things in there. I know I jumped in, but I'm a huge advocate of Cathy's Picks. So I really do hope that you guys sign up for this.
It's I just send it once a week. It's on Fridays. It doesn't mess up your inbox, but I actually spend a lot of time. I enjoy it finding really interesting articles about organizing, but also inspiring stories around photos and stories. I share 4 of them with you. One's always going to be a tip, an inspiring story, maybe a special offer from a company, and that's it. So it's easy to kind of delete it, read it, and so hopefully you'll subscribe to that. We now also do that live on YouTube. So we're doing Cathy's
Picks next month.
Yeah, you're going to do favorite photo products.
Right? That's right. I'm going to be hosting about backplace.
Yeah, that we just talked about. So I think our next slide is.
Oh, so this is super important. Please provide your feedback if you're on this webinar, and this shows you how to find it.
And also, why don't we at this point see if there's questions in the chat? Have anybody asked any questions that our moderator has going to read out our questions for us, and then we'll share our social media.
Sign up for this.
It's I just send it once a week. It's on Fridays. It doesn't mess up your inbox.
It's looping again.
I enjoy it finding really interesting articles about organizing, but also inspiring stories. Maybe we can see the chat. I share 4 of them with you. One's always going to be a tip, an inspiring story, maybe a special offer from.
We can't see any questions in the chat. So because we can hear the loop, I'm going to mute the computer, and please just type in any
questions and we'll answer them. Yeah. And while we're waiting to see if anybody's going to type anything here.
So while you're waiting, this is how to get hold of us. This is my information. And, no questions yet. Okay, great. Okay, great. Yeah. So, this is my information. Our website, where you can find us. Follow us on Instagram. We do some really fun things that are actually really helpful. And you want to go to the next slide?
Oops. And here's it's a lot of information. You're welcome to, you can reach out to us if you have questions at support at the photo managers. If you're live in different parts of the country, we can recommend a professional photo organizer who can help you with your photos. If we only recommend our certified photo managers who've gone through a process of being certified, they agree to our code of ethics. So you have confidence that they've been vetted. And then you can follow us on Facebook and also, through YouTube and all sorts of different ways. So we'd love to connect with you further and help you get those photos back into your life in a way that's meaningful so that you can share your family stories.
Inspirational and aspirational.
I think that's.
Yeah, if there are no questions, should we give it a minute? I don't know. But we would love to answer any questions that may come through. I'm sorry, I cannot unmute this computer because we're getting that loop.
Which they will.
But this was fun.
This was really fun. I really on the road.
I know. This is great. I really appreciate that. Has Haleh found help with genealogy in Iran? My family is also Iranian. Iranian genealogy is tough because there are no records before 1930. And in fact, my father was born in 1927, and his father decided to adopt a last name called Shoa because he was a dervish and a healer, and it means ray, as in ray of the sun. But his brother decided to adopt the last name Melamed, which means teacher, because he was a teacher. So finding records in Iranian genealogy is very, very difficult. I really highly encourage whoever is asking that question to really start talking to the elders in your family. A huge part of developing our genealogy is literally through oral history. So someone, an older cousin, an aunt or uncle, hopefully your grandparents are still around and they can answer some of those questions.
Did they change their last name? So last names weren't.
They adopted that. There weren't a last name. It was like,
ever like in the 1800s, you wouldn't have had a last name. It was
correct. It was
from a village, maybe.
Son of like so and so that lives on that street.
Yeah.
It was like daughter of so and so, the third daughter of so and so. So
was it a new idea to take a last name in a way? Like, is that something that was like a modernizing way?
Yes, that's right. That's right. They started to do records, and my father doesn't even have a birth certificate. So, we asked my grandmother when he was born, and she said 10 days after the first snow. So we thought 10 days after the first snow. Okay, December 31st. I don't know. Are there any other questions? We love questions, don't we?
Yeah. That's fascinating, though. It's amazing to learn about other cultures. Like I
Right?
just never would have thought about that, but it's interesting. How different cultures took on last names. And fascinating.
Yeah. And then the whole area, the whole Arab world, they were Bedouins. They weren't even in one place.
Yeah. So they were,
so they were always moving around and almost like gypsy-like. When I grew up, there were still a lot of gypsies in Iran because they would knock on our door to ask for water and blankets. And my mother always had old clean blankets to give to the gypsies. And of course, we always gave them water too.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Chris, any other questions? All right.
Well, thank you again, everybody. That's fascinating. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.